Okay, hello. So I'm a few minutes late, I apologise. Actually, I'm always a few minutes late, so maybe we'll just have to get used to that. Anyway, welcome. This is our webinar on overcoming performance anxiety, which is something that so many performers struggle with. It is really almost universal. There's something about performing in front of people and being seen. Okay, hello. So I'm a few minutes late, I apologise. I'm hearing myself. Okay, let's try that again. So yes, anyway, it's really good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. I'm in a little bit of an identity crisis. We have been doing these webinars monthly as Inside Dancers Hangouts, and I recently did a launch, as you probably will know, for my new Believe in Yourself course on how to overcome fear and self-doubt and step into your potential. And when I've been doing that, all the free videos and things along with that, we actually got a lot of people join us who aren't dancers, who are actors or comedians, or even just other people who are in different areas completely, but who perform, whether that's in job interviews or so we've kind of got a bit of a broader audience now. So I'm trying to work out how do I title these webinars, and how do I, well, everything. Here to help dancers seems a little bit limited now. So anyway, it's lovely to have everyone here. And if you have any ideas about, what else we could call this, or, how we can be a bit more welcoming in, how things appear, then yeah, please let me know. I'd love to hear your ideas. So yeah, we're going to be talking about overcoming performance anxiety today, and particularly about how you can prepare so that you can overcome it, so you actually avoid it entirely, not like last minute band-aid stuff, but how can you actually prepare yourself so that when the performance comes, you know what to do and you know how to handle things when they come up. So I want to start just by talking about what causes performance anxiety, because that is important to help us get our bearings. So sometimes it can be things like inexperience. If you just haven't got that much stage experience, it feels new. And when you're inexperienced, you're a lot more aware of everything going on. So you're actually having to consciously put effort in to perform. And so that means that you haven't got a lot of energy to deal with any extra things that come up. So sometimes it's just a matter that you haven't got that much experience. But the good thing is performing gives you experience. So if you can see your performance, if you're inexperienced and you're finding yourself getting anxious, just know that's because you're learning, and performing is the only way you'll learn how to perform well. So yeah, so just keep at it. That's one reason. Another reason is some people are just kind of generally fearful. It's just a bit of a trait that they just tend to be a little more cautious. And so being in a performing environment just, takes that anxiety level up a little higher and can sort of push you over the edge. That's right. So sometimes it's a case of your challenge, your perception of the challenge that you're, whatever it is you're doing on stage, it seems like it's out of your ability to perform well. So if you think the challenge is too big and you're not up to it, then the chances are you're probably going to experience some anxiety there. So if you feel like you know what you're doing and you're confident that you can do it well, you're probably going to have less anxiety if you think your ability matches the challenge. So it's important to know what's something you can handle, and try and keep within that limit of, this is within my comfort zone. You want to stretch that out gradually. But yeah, so trying to keep things in your comfort zone. The other time that we get performance anxiety is when we're in an unfamiliar environment. So I know I have been working a lot with dancers, and dancers usually work in a ballet studio or with mirrors, and so you get the mirror feedback. And then suddenly you go on stage and you don't have mirrors, you can't copy anyone. You've got this big black open space in front of you instead of a mirror, and so there's a big change in the environment. And so again, your system goes on alert, and you have to pay attention to all sorts of different things than you usually would. So that's where performance anxiety can come up. So we're going to talk about a few things about how you can learn how to manage that and prepare for those things in what we're going to talk about tonight. But first, I do just want to talk a little bit about your brain. So I won't get into this in too much detail, because I know not everyone, it can get a bit confusing when we talk about brain stuff. And I'm certainly not, you know, a neuroscientist, but I have studied a bit of neuropsychotherapy, and yeah, find it really helpful to understand how your brain works so that you know what's happening, so that when it happens, when you get anxious, you go, oh, this is what's happening. I understand this. Again, if you understand it, it feels a little less scary. And if performance anxiety feels a little less scary, well, that's a great thing. So what happens in your brain when you get stressed, or you get nervous, you get anxious, is basically there's a trigger that goes off. Something about this situation is unusual, it's different, it's maybe unsafe, it's out of my comfort zone. And so your brain, it stops sending blood to the, you know, the cortex, the kind of the big part of your brain that you usually see on pictures. The part that's kind of smart and thinks well, problem solves, remembers your steps and your lines, that sort of stuff. And your brain sends the blood instead to the central part of your brain called the limbic system, which is kind of your survival center. It's your emotional center. It's impulsive. And so that basically it is to protect you. And so your body gets flooded with these hormones, stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, other hormones that you don't really want to know how to pronounce. And it basically fills you with your body with, okay, I'm ready with all this energy to either fight the dangerous beast or to run away very fast. Sometimes there's a freeze response. So this is known as fight or flight. There's also a freeze response, which is kind of like a deer in headlights, where you just kind of get stuck, and that's a way of, well, if I just freeze, then the enemy will walk past and not realize I'm here. So the problem is when you're on a stage, there's not actually an enemy, and it's so that's why it can be really hard to actually get over it. So we've got to deal with your thinking and work out how you can calm yourself down. So that's what happens in your brain, and as I'll look at now what happens in your body and what happens in your mind and in your emotions, because it affects everything. So if you can start to look at what happens in your body, you'll start to understand what's happening in your brain. So let me just go onto my slides to help you understand this. Okay, so if we look at the anatomy of performance anxiety, so physical things are quite obvious usually with performance anxiety. You can get short of breath. You start to breathe really fast and shallow. You might notice your heart pounding in your chest. A lot of people talk about butterflies, you know, butterflies in your stomach. You feel a bit jittery or fidgety or shaky. And that's because, yeah, again, all these chemicals are being sent to your body. So there's a little bit of an overdose. So you're a little bit shaky. Sometimes people feel tense. They can get tight and stiff when they get anxious. Shoulders get raised and tight. So you're a little bit less flexible and able to move the way you want to, especially if you're a dancer. Sometimes you get sweaty. You can get a dry mouth, which is great if you're a singer or not. So yeah, these are some of the things that you can look at that'll help you tell, hang on, I'm getting a little bit short of breath here. Maybe I'm getting anxious. So for myself, I realize I'm talking a little bit fast right now. So maybe I'm a bit anxious. So I'm just going to take a moment. I'm going to have a deep breath and take my own advice. So now I actually don't feel so anxious. Wasn't that easy? So overcoming performance anxiety can be as simple as just breathing deeply. As far as the physical things go, if you breathe deeply, so sometimes if you're really wound up, you have to sort of have a pause at the top of your breath in, and then a pause at the end of your breath out to help you slow it down. But if you can slow down your breathing, you can actually, it sends messages to your nervous system to say, it's okay, I'm safe, I don't need to have this fight, flight, or freeze response. So that's what happens in your body. In your head, you might also notice racing thoughts, a lot of what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I forget my steps? What if? So these generally don't help you think well. So racing thoughts are usually negative. There's a lot of self-doubt. You might be worried about things. Sometimes you can blank out, which is again comes back to that freeze response, where you actually just kind of switch off. That's, again, trying to protect you. It's not very useful when you're about to go on stage, but we just got to know this is a way your body's trying to protect you. You can also lose focus. So again, it's really hard when you've got all those racing thoughts to actually say, this is what I'm focusing on. And if you remember what happens in your brain, because your brain is sending blood to the impulsive center of your brain rather than the cortex, which is your thinking smart brain, it is harder to focus because there's not a lot of blood flow going to the places that will help you do that. So as far as your mind is concerned and being able to help you notice and then change your mental state is to actually think about how can I reassure myself and what is my intention? Come back to my intention. What am I here to do? And if I can just focus on that, just whatever it is, just do this, just be like that. Tell yourself, just do this, and you can help recenter and refocus your mind. Okay, the third part that the performance anxiety affects is your emotions. So usually this is all fear-based emotions that come up, again, because that stress response happens in your brain and it's all about fear. So fear of things like failing or being judged. There's people watching you. So you might get judged. People might not like you. You might make a mistake. You might feel bad about yourself. You might disappoint someone. You're wanting to impress someone. So these are the kind of fears that come up. You might feel shocked. You might think, oh my gosh, I can't do that. There's so many people in the audience. You can get panicky where you start to think, oh no, I'm not going to be able to cope. And that's a lot because of that short breathing, and you actually do get lightheaded. There's apprehension. I really don't want to go on stage. And that can actually even end up with people not going on stage. I've seen that happen before. And just a real sense of inadequacy. I'm not able to cope with this. So remember, this response that happens in your brain is a survival instinct, and it comes to protect us from dangers, you know, like the bear coming to chase you. And so it's really important to remind yourself, to help you calm down emotionally, that there is no bear. If I go on stage and I make a mistake, it might be embarrassing, but it's going to be okay. So you can apply some context to the situation and remind yourself there's no bears. I can do this. Okay, so that's how the anatomy of performance anxiety works. Let me just come back to you. Oh, was that? Were you seeing me or the screen? I'm not sure. I get a bit confused on this Google Hangouts here, but it's a great tool. Okay, so that's kind of what happens. So that's a way you can recognize what's happening. If you start to notice the racing thoughts, you start to notice you're feeling afraid, you're worried, you're panicky, you're getting clammy, cold sweats. If you notice these things happening, often you go, oh no, and you worry about the worry, which just makes things worse. So if you notice any of those things happening, don't worry about it. Just go, oh, that means that I'm experiencing performance anxiety. So they're kind of clues that'll help you get out of it if you listen to them and you come with a sense of, oh, hang on, that's what that is. I understand that. So as soon as you notice those things coming up, like I did before, noticing myself breathing shallowly, you can change it, calm down, and refocus. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit now about how you can actually prepare for your performances so that you don't end up really needing to do any of those last minute things like, you know, breathing slow. You might still need to do it, but you can actually just be so prepared that it becomes just the next step to go on stage. And so you're actually in a focused state. That means it's natural to go on stage. So the first thing that will help you to be able to avoid performance anxiety, or to overcome it if you've experienced it before, is to actually visualize and do some mental rehearsal. So this is not only a little bit less energetic if you're tired and exhausted from a lot of rehearsing, but it's also a really great way you can control in your mind you can perform really, really well in your mind, whereas in real life, you're going to have a lot more issues come up. So it's quite a unique strategy. It actually helps your muscle memory and helps your body to learn. So research has shown that it's effective for that, not as effective as rehearsing in your body, but combined with rehearsing in your body, it's pretty good. So let's just have a look at what slides did I have here for you. All right, so visualize, that's right. So the thing with visualization is you don't want to practice practicing, you want to practice performing, okay? If you practice and you visualize yourself practicing in a studio, in your rehearsal space, at home, it's actually not going to be so helpful for you. You need to, if you want to overcome performance anxiety, to overcome that performance anxiety, you actually want to practice performing in your head. So you want to see yourself in that place. Let me just come back. No, yeah, because I don't need my slide up for the whole thing for that. So you want to actually see yourself performing in the context. So have a think about, if you haven't been to the theatre, Google it and look at what it looks like. Look at the auditorium, look at the backstage, look at what it looks like from the side of the stage. Maybe you can ask other people who've performed there what it's like. And if you can get a picture in your head of what the space looks like, you can actually visualize. So before you start to see yourself perform, imagine yourself in the backstage area, imagine yourself getting ready, getting dressed, going side of stage, standing in the wings, looking past the lights, what's going to be on before you, imagining yourself then getting ready, focused, calm, and then going on stage, on the stage you're going to be performing on, and performing just the way you want to perform. So performing, not making mistakes, you want to actually see yourself and practice performing really well. And the more often you can do this, the more you can actually get comfortable in that new environment of the theatre, so, or the venue, wherever you're performing. So remember at the beginning we talked about the causes. So one of the causes is inexperience, and another one was in unfamiliar environment. If you can practice visualizing yourself in that context, even if you're not able to rehearse there a lot, in person, if you can do some visualization, that'll help you become more familiar. So when you get there, you're like, oh yeah, I know this place. I can perform well here. Yeah, so see how that builds your confidence? So that's the first thing. The second thing, which I'll just go back to check my slides for, is adversity training. Now this is something that military do to help them prepare for, the pressures and the intensity of war situations. Now, I'm not telling you to go and, go in boot camp and crawl through the jungle, but you can apply this in a performance context too. So what would adversity look like in your situation? If you want to perform at your best, you need to prepare for the worst, because if you feel you can handle the worst, chances are the worst or everything about the worst is not going to happen, and you'll actually end up feeling more confident to be able to perform well. Okay, let me come back again. Okay, so this is going to be different whatever your situation is, whatever your art form is, whatever you're doing. But think about what are some of the worst things that could happen. What are some of the things that would distract me while I'm performing? So maybe, I know there's always this kind of classic thing that almost always happens in, some school performances, and is that someone's shoe or their ribbons will come undone. So if that happens, how are you going to keep performing? So maybe what you could do with an adversity training would be to practice with your ribbon coming loose. Have it just loose as you start and see how you go performing, and do this with if you're in a school or in a company, your whole group can do this together, especially if it's before a big performance or a premiere. It's really helpful for everyone to do this together. So you might practice, you want to be able to see, when am I going to decide to take the shoe off? When am I going to leave it on? Can I quickly go out into the wings at this point or that point? The more prepared you can be to actually handle the adverse situation when it happens, the better. So it might be, you might practice with a whole lot of people talking over you while you're trying to perform. You might have some hecklers in the audience. You might have, what other sort of things can you have? Let me just check my notes here. You might, if you're adversity training, if you're getting nervous and you're getting actually a lot of performance anxiety and you're getting some of those physical symptoms where you're short of breath and you're unable to calm down, try running around, do a few laps of your rehearsal space before you start it, or do some star jumps or something. And then when you're already that excited and nervous and energetic, start your performance then. So these kind of things just help push you to your limits to see how you can handle those difficult things. So that then if they come, you're like, oh, I've done that before, I can do this. Yeah, let me just see if there was anything else I wanted to say on that. Yeah, you might also have other people who are influencing you. So someone might forget their steps who's standing in front of you, or so just think about different ways in your context, whatever that is, that you can, how could you actually practice? And it can be fun too. It can be really fun, and teachers can do this with their students. What if we imagine I'm going to do this and I'm going to stop the music and the music's going to cut out halfway through? What would you do? And even if you can just brainstorm those kind of things, it can be really helpful. All right, so that's adversity training. And if you can't do that in person, if it's really not going to work, you can at least do it in your head. And again, with the visualization, you can practice performing in difficult circumstances. So that's adversity training. The third one, come over here, that I wanted to talk to you about as a way you can prepare for performances is actually having a pre-performance routine. Now, some of you may have heard of this. This is just a way of having some calm preparation, which means you can perform confidently. The more you feel like you're in control of what you're doing, the more you'll feel in control when you perform. So if you can have a routine where it becomes normal, so the more often you perform, the more often you perform your routine before you start, the easier it is to actually go on stage and then be creative and confident and spontaneous. So you want to have that sense of control beforehand so you can go on and be experimental. So let me come back. So some ways you can do this is some things. So you might think about what can you do the night before. So if you think about how can I prepare for this performance, so that I do these things, it's part of my routine, so that when I go on stage, I don't have to worry about some of those things. So you might have a checklist the night before that you make sure you've got everything ready that you need. And you do that the night before. You might think about what you're going to eat. I know when I was a kid and we used to do a lot of ballet competitions, and my mum used to always make these little cheese and what are they, little mini quiches, and we would always have them whenever we went to competitions. And it was something that you just knew they would digest well, you knew we could perform with them. It was something that I got used to as this is something that works for me when I'm in performance mode. So what about your timing? Are you someone who likes to take a lot of time to get ready, get to the theatre really early, get your bearings? Are you someone who prefers to stay busy and distracted and then just get in there the last moment so that you go on stage and don't have to worry? Everyone's going to be different. So it's working out what works for you. You might think about music. Some people like to listen to music. Different types of music will get you more energetic if you're feeling tired. Some different types of music will help you to calm down if you're getting anxious. So think about what would actually help me to perform well, and how can I make a routine? It doesn't need to be like I must do this. You don't want to get too superstitious about it, because otherwise you can start, that can actually interfere with your performance when you think, oh no, I didn't do that, so now it's not gonna work. The most important thing in your pre-performance routine is to go, whatever happens, if anything unusual happens, it's gonna work for the better for me. So take it all on board and assume it's gonna work for the best. If you assume it's gonna go for the worst, it will. So say, okay, how can I take that on board? And all right, that's happened. This is going to work out for my best. It's going to mean I'm going to be more prepared. I'm going to be whatever. So anything that happens in the last day, just go with it and say, I'll take that on. Even if it doesn't seem like it's going to help you, just assume it will and channel it. Okay, so there's some things that you can do to help you get ready for your show so that you've visualized, you've seen yourself in that performance space. You're like, yeah, I can do this. You've practiced some difficult things that might come up, or at least you've brainstormed, if something terrible happened like that, what would I do? And as long as you've got this kind of buffer of preparation, and especially in your pre-performance routine, it means that in the lead up, you get ready, you do what you do, the same kind of things happen, it becomes normal. And the more normal you feel before going on stage, the less likely you are to experience performance anxiety. Does that make sense? So if you can make your day on the day, or the week, if it's a really big new performance, the more you can make yourself ready and comfortable and feel normal, the more you'll be able to be free and let go when you do go on stage and just be yourself and do what it is that you're there to do. Okay, so lastly, I just want to spend a few minutes giving some tips for teachers, because I know that there's some teachers amongst us that watch this and go, how can I help my students to stay calm on the day and not make them more nervous? Before I talk about the teachers, I do just want to remind everyone that at the bottom of the page, we've actually got a handout. If you scroll right down, somehow the only way I could set it up with the page was that you need to put in your email details. You're already signed up for the Hangouts, there's the webinars, so that doesn't really matter, but that was the only way I could manage to get you a download link that I could work out. So if you just fill in your details at the bottom there, and you could download a handout which will help you to map out for yourself what are the things that I can do to prepare for performances. So you can download that at the bottom. There's also a survey if anyone's interested. All right, but I will now talk to teachers about how you can help your students. So let me find my slides again. How you can actually help your students. Now, a lot of what teachers can do is take things that I've talked about so far and actually do that with your kids. So, oh, hang on, no, first of all, prepare yourself to stay calm. That's the first thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. So actually prepare yourself so that you can stay calm. So what does your routine need to be? How can you make sure, and I haven't talked about diet and sleep, but they're also really important. If you have a lot of caffeine, or if your students have a lot of caffeine, for example, they're going to be on the edge already. So if you think about those physical symptoms of anxiety, it doesn't take much to push you over the edge if your body's already full of caffeine and really stimulated already. So think about your diet, your sleep. What's your routine? How can you stay calm? If you're stressed, it's going to rub off on your students. So prepare yourself so that you can be your most calm and you can perform your best, whether that's on stage or side of stage. Use visualization in your rehearsals. At the end of your rehearsal, take 5 minutes to just get your students to see themselves in the theatre, see them getting ready, walking backstage, getting on, put your music on or whatever it is in your setting, and imagine them actually doing it. They can all lie down and get them to see themselves performing well the way they want to. Give them practice in visualization. Use adversity training. This is a lot of fun. And the good thing is, if adversity training is fun, you start to see that terrible things don't have to be so terrible. And performing can actually be exciting rather than fearful. Share examples of pre-performance routines. So get them to ask each other, what do you do before a performance? What helps you to perform well? This is what helped me or helps me to perform well. Help people get an idea of what routines might look like. Talk about what could go wrong and brainstorm how to prepare or cope with those things. So example with the shoes, if your shoe ribbons are going to come apart, then what can you do? Maybe some people stitch their ribbons in for performances and then they know they're not going to come off on stage. So that's something you could do to prepare. Or like I said, you can work out how you're going to cope. Would you throw the shoe off at this point, or that kind of thing. Next thing, you want to help your students to get familiar with the performance venue early. So again, with students, a lot of the time they're inexperienced, so they need a bit more time to get used to that space because there's so many things their brain is on alert to. So bring in your iPad into the studio and show students photos of the place. Get the other students who've performed there before to tell the people who haven't what it's like. What the colours of the seats are, you know, all these sorts of details really help for students to become familiar with that space so that when they get in there, they're able to handle it better. Oh, we've got 3 at once. So a nervous student needs calming down, not pepping up. That's really important. Remember, a nervous, anxious student is actually already really highly aroused. So they don't need to actually calm down. They don't need to be pepped up and say, come on, you can do this. They actually need to be calmed down. So take a few deep breaths with them, remind them they can do it, get behind them. Remind students that failure is actually normal. It's not something that they need to be afraid of. Everyone makes mistakes, even YouTube, people in your art form who have failed, and just watch some of the videos of the big stuff ups and the bloopers and remind your students that this is actually a part of learning how to perform well, is making mistakes. They become the funniest stories that everyone loves to remember. So there is a good side to failure in the end. Also remember to believe in your students, to just encourage them, get behind them. Remember, if you're stressed, that's gonna come out in them as well. And lastly, yeah, emphasize good sleep and nutrition. Helps their body to actually downregulate their stress and to have their smart brain really working when they go on stage. Okay. Oh, I didn't I didn't share that. Sorry, guys. Oops. Looks like you were looking at me, looking at my slides. Anyways, hopefully I didn't pick my nose. I think we're all good. Okay, so it's time to finish. We are not going to have a webinar in December because it's Christmas, or in between Christmas and New Year's. It's just the time a lot of us have a break, if you're fortunate enough to. But we will start off again in January. January, we're going to talk about goal setting and achieving, because a lot of the time we talk about goal setting at the beginning of the year, but we never get around to actually achieving it. So we're going to talk about how you can actually plan out your goals so that you can make progress and little by little actually achieve them. So stay involved and look out on your emails for information about that in January. And if you have any other things suggestions or comments, then please just scroll down and to the survey below, and you can leave me some information about how you found today and what you'd like to talk about in other webinars. Thanks so much for coming, and yep, here's to helping you.